Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out on such an early start, but I know many of you, this is very familiar territory. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people on whose lands we meet this morning and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also welcome any Indigenous or Torres Strait Islander people with us this morning. Auntie Violet has been giving us wonderful, warm welcomes to country throughout the year for this, but she's finally called it. She said, "I'm not doing any more mornings." My name's Lish Fayer. I work at ABC, and it's been my absolute pleasure to host these breakfasts throughout the year. I think this is the 8th, is it, Jacqui? The 8th or 9th, 7th. The team has been remarkable in organising these, and I think they have found the perfect balance of workplace safety, education, awareness, and the best breakfast in town. So it's wonderful that you all came out this morning. When throughout the morning, you're going to hear from 4 wonderful speakers. Today, it's the final breakfast series for the year, and it's on first responders. So thank you all for coming. There'll be some graphic descriptions, some points that might raise some issues for you. So please, if that happens, just take your time, take your place, and speak to someone. Also, we're recording this for the future, so if you don't want to be on the recording, just raise it with one of the WorkSafe employees and we'll make sure you are removed. I've really learnt so much doing these breakfasts. It's been extraordinary. When I started doing the WorkSafe ACT breakfasts, I thought OH&S, is what I knew it as, was literally just looking after your back and sitting in the right position at your desk and making sure that your workplace was safe for you, safe for anyone that came into it. But what I've learnt is that it is so ingrained. The tendrils of workplace safety go into every single part of that organisation. And not just the physical safety, but the mental safety, the emotional safety and risks associated with any work we do. And depending on the workplace, those risks will be different. And as you are so well aware, no doubt, working in the work that you do as first responders, extraordinary risks for you going to work every day, doing the work that you do. And I really thank you for doing that work, because without it, I don't know where we'd be. I really don't know where we'd be. Having been on ABC Radio during the fires and speaking to the Commissioner, Georgina Wheeland, every day, pretty much getting an update. And we were just reporting the stories. You are doing the work. And I couldn't even begin to imagine what that's like. I can't even. So thank you. From me, but also from Canberra for doing the work that you do. Let's kick it off. We've got 4 wonderful speakers today, and joining us on the table, thank you for joining us this morning, along with Minister Michael Peta. Thank you for joining us. And today we're going to start with Jacqueline Agius, who is our fearless leader, Work Health and Safety Commissioner, Labour Hire Licence Commissioner here in the ACT, to just kickstart the morning. We'll have 5 to 10 minutes from each of our speakers, and then we'll have a panel discussion. Now, you're thinking, where's the breakfast? I signed up for breakfast. Where is it? It'll come. And please, I want the solid sound of cutlery, chomping, eating, drinking. Refresh your cup whenever you need, and just enjoy the breakfast and tune in. Thanks, Jacqui. Give her a big round warm welcome. We're all up early.
Thank you. Great to see you all here so early. I'll just drop that a bit. It's an occupational health hazard being so short. Sometimes when I speak at events, the lectern is too high and I have to stand on tippy toes, and you can just see my eyes over the top. That didn't land, did it? This is the second breakfast we've had where it's rained in the morning, and it's the second time we've had a few empty seats, but hopefully some more people will come in through the morning. Today is our last breakfast, and because it's our last breakfast, I've let my hair down. And I just want to call out a special hello to the beautiful therapy dog that we have around, the ESA therapy dog, Banksy. There she is down the front. If you see Banksy, give her a pat because she absolutely loves being loved. WorkSafe promote and encourage respectful events free from aggression and harassment. If you require any assistance during the morning, please go up to one of our WorkSafe employees. They are in uniform and you'll be able to seek assistance from them if you need it. The Ngunnawal people are the traditional owners of Canberra and our regions, and I acknowledge their continuing connection to land and country. I also acknowledge any other people or communities with connections to the ACT and our regions, and I extend my acknowledgement to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present. I'm also happy to acknowledge Minister Pedersen. Minister Pedersen was announced as the Industrial Relations and Work Safety Minister, and is a first-time minister. So congratulations, Minister Pedersen. And I also would like to thank our wonderful speakers for dedicating their time to be here to speak about this most important topic. I mean, what more could you ask for at 7 a.m? A energetic MC, the darling of the ABC Airways, Miss Lish Vaya. Thank you, and Lish has been here for all of our breakfasts, and we thank you, Lish, for all of that. Our wonderful speakers who will share their expertise with you, and of course the piece de resistance, a free breakfast, because that's what you all came for, right? Not really. You came here to speak about safety. We're all here because we are committed to safety. And being committed to safety is one of the most important things that we can do throughout our lives, because often people don't realise the difference that we can make in a workplace if it is a safe workplace. And as a PCBU myself, I'm constantly grappling with that question: how do we keep our people safe? Before our speakers, I found this morning, which is great. Before our speakers get into the nitty-gritty, I wanted to start things off today by looking at the WHS landscape that our data paints for first responders. There are over 80,000 full-time emergency workers and 420,000 volunteer emergency workers in Australia. That is a massive workforce. The term first responders traditionally refers to professionals such as paramedics, police officers and firefighters. It also includes those who work in O communication centres and non-emergency patient transport. Additionally, it refers to individuals who perform these functions in a volunteer capacity, like our amazing SES, RFS volunteers, our Lifeline volunteers, our Vinnie's volunteers, and other charity volunteers. It can also refer to DV workers and other support workers who find themselves in a situation where they're required to be first responders. First responders are usually highly skilled people who deliver the initial response in emergency situations, interacting with people and the forces of nature in extreme circumstances. It comes as no surprise that when these scenarios are part of a normal workday, there is an increased risk to workers of both psychological and physical harm. Personally, like everyone else in the room, I'm very grateful to first responders. In fact, in 2019, I required the services of paramedics twice. The first time was when I broke my leg in 4 places and required some significant pain relief. Phew, that was amazing. Thanks for the green whistle. And the second time, because of the surgery I had had to my leg, in the middle of the night I woke up with a massive stomach bleed and nearly died, and was saved by paramedics. So I have a lot to be grateful for. Often first responders, employers of first responders, the response requirement of the job takes priority, and not enough attention is given to job design. That is to consider the hazards and risks as early as possible when structuring the work. In the ACT, public sector, between financial years 2014 to 15 and financial years 2024 to 25, and these figures were accurate as of the 31st of October, there were a total of 460 accepted workers' compensation claims lodged by first responders. Less than 60 of these were psychosocial related claims. 24 claims were due to exposure to a traumatic event. 12 claims were due to work pressure. Fewer than 10 claims were due to other mental stress factors. In the last 2 financial years, WorkSafe received 3 incident notifications and 5 complaints confirmed to be from first responders. Additionally, there are notifiable incidents and complaints made by workers in agencies associated with first responders that do not specify the occupation. If we account for instances where the occupation is unclear, there may have been up to 30 notification incidents and 20 complaints related to first responders during this period. And that would put first responders in one of the highest risk industries. So it is an industry that we need to prioritise safety in, and it's why we've chosen to have our breakfast on first responders this morning. In 2019, a Senate report, the people behind OOO, mental health and our first responders, the most commonly reported mental health conditions among first responders were depression, anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. The report also noted that this group experiences high risks of comorbidity where individuals suffer from multiple conditions. Tragically, the report highlighted higher rates of self-medication with alcohol and other forms of substance abuse amongst first responders. Work-related violence poses a significant risk to first responders, with some studies estimating that paramedics have nearly triple the odds of experiencing physical and verbal violence. The violence can come from patients, their families, friends, bystanders, or even individuals who specifically and deliberately target first responders. The reasons behind such violence can vary, including frustration, fear, substance abuse, mental health issues, or conflicts arising from the provision of care. There are a number of risks related to being a first responder, and one of those is, of course, shift work, and due to the ever-changing and increasingly 24/7 orientated society and economy, the burden of people to work all hours of the day has increased. Natural disasters, crimes and health emergencies do not occur within usual working hours. It would be nice, wouldn't it, if we could say, oh, don't start a fire until 9 a.m, please, because that never happens. It always happens outside of hours. research shows that shift work and regular or long working hours can adversely affect the health and safety of wellbeing of workers. Fatigue management is critical, and Safe Work Australia are currently consulting on a fatigue code of practice. When that code of practice is released, I would encourage you all to have a look at it. It will be at some stage adopted by the ACT. In the ACT, there are a number of deemed diseases related to workers' compensation claims, and the ACT government last year implemented a policy that streamlined the workers' comp claims process for eligible ACT public servant employees suffering from PTSD. As this is our last breakfast of the year, I would like to take the opportunity to thank a few people. The team at WorkSafe, especially Frank and Alice, for their amazing work in pulling these breakfasts together. And I'd really, given this is the last one, I'd really love it if you could give them a round of applause. I'd also like to thank all of our speakers, of course, the energetic energiser Bunny Lish, for her insights and learning, because along the journey, Lish has spoken about some of the things that she's learned at this breakfast, and we're hoping that that has been across the board. Want to thank all of you for your engagement and your questions, and I hope soon that will continue. But keep your eye out for more WorkSafe events next year, and please subscribe to our email list to receive more safety updates. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jacqui. I always love that the stairs down here don't have a handle. Like everything I notice has all got a WorkSafe lens here. I tell you what, our next speaker is going to have trouble, because down here, while Banksy the therapy dog may offer great support, he's not made of wood, and he's desperate for some breakfast. Like any good Labrador, 100% focused on what's on the plate. Our next speaker is Wayne Phillips, Commissioner of the ESA. Now, Wayne has been in the role Commissioner Phillips has been in the role for a year now, but he has a long history in service as a firefighter with Fire and Safety New South Wales. He's worked in the industry for a long time and brings that here to the ACT now as Commissioner, ahead of another big season. Thanks for joining us. Big round of applause.
Wow, round of applause, thank you. I've been along a long time, I think it's obvious. If the breakfasts bring on rain, Jacqueline, more breakfasts. I love saying the rain this time of year, I've got to say. Sorry, everybody. Also want to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people where we are today. What a privilege to be the Commissioner of the Emergency Services Agency. I lead ordinary people doing extraordinary things every day, both paid and volunteer services, who respond to the needs and the most vulnerable people in Canberra 365 days a year. It's unbelievable. And thank you for having this breakfast today, and thank you for inviting me, because mental health and the mental fitness of my people is really something I'm very passionate about since I became Commissioner. So I propose a question to you is, what is the leading cause of mental health problems in emergency services? So, and just to answer that question in your own mind, because the 2018 Beyond Blue study answering the call said the leading cause of mental health problems in emergency services is the way we treat our people at work. So we have an ability in emergency services to not really be as compassionate to our own people as we are to the people that we serve. And all emergency services across Australia are trying to work out how we can do this a lot better, moving a lot better in regards to bringing in leadership and better management training. So at the ESA, particularly this year, we've been building a culture of purely treating people compassionately and with humility. It's a message that we're sending out as Commissioner, our senior leaders. One of the other messages we've been sending out is incivility in the workplace. Now, I talk about this, it can sound quite trivial in a lot of ways, but we're trying to build an environment within the ESA of where people come and feel like they belong at work, and there can be quite sort of, soft words, but if people come and they feel like they belong at a place, at the end of the day, they're going to serve you and I better and Jacqueline better on those days when they need it. People who are engaged at work feel like they belong there, are better trained, respond better and do their job better, and are less likely to suffer post-traumatic stress. Some of the actions we've brought in this year particularly is some leadership training. We've done some clarity around functional roles and what the swim lane is for you in your role, in your position. We've done some work around, we've used Lifeline to bring in mental health awareness with other providers, to bring in a level of our own mental health awareness amongst our own people, not just what we do with the public. We've brought in regular more conversations. We've got the leaders walking the floor and talking with staff. Some of these are really simple actions, but I feel like they're the actions that we do to bring trust back into the building and back for our staff, because when the staff trust their leaders, they're more likely to respond better to the public. I'll keep using that mantra about looking after ourselves first before we look after you. Don't worry, we'll always look after the public, but without looking after ourselves first, we can't look after you. So I'm very passionate about that. Like a good sporting team, we train, we look after ourselves. At the end of the day, if the premiership is saving a life, we've won the premiership. Other initiatives is simple things like Banksy and Lockie, our dogs. I've got to say, when Banksy the dog came in to particularly head office, and she lives practically in my office, I didn't realise the impact and the barriers that break down between staff and the Commissioner. So in a lot of ways, the Commissioner can be quite a scary position in an emergency services situation, and be able to open the door up and meet different staff, call takers from downstairs in the comm centre, paramedics, firefighters, staff, enabling staff, come in and take this bloody dog for walks every day and feed it. It's unbelievable. But what it does is that it gives me an opportunity to have a conversation and find out a litmus test on how things are going in the building and how things are going in real life. So it's been a funny old initiative, I've got to tell you. Thank you for the invite today, and I look forward to taking questions on stage, I suppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It is interesting, isn't it, just having something as simple as a dog join the workforce. Mightn't have ever been on the books probably before, and I don't know if she's got a certified agreement. Maybe it just involves bacon. But certainly even coming in here, because often an event like this is not the most comfortable space for a lot of people, but as soon as there's something like Banksy, immediately you feel comfortable. So, and I wonder who's taking who for a walk, Commissioner. Sometimes I think, yeah, it's a powerful thing. Carrie Leeson is the CEO of Lifeline Canberra, and again, just drawing on my radio experience, I think I'm former darling of the ABC, no longer, but the experience we have, we always back announce, please call Lifeline. Lifeline is always available. Lifeline is a volunteer organisation. Funding is continually ongoing, and if you've ever been to a book fair, you'll know that they make every dollar go a long way. And all of those volunteers on the end of the phone for those 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, it's extraordinary. What an extraordinary service. But how do they look after the people? How do you care for the people that care for everyone else? And as Commissioner was saying, the fact you have to look after your people so they can look after everyone else. Can you please give a big warm welcome to Carrie Leeson?
Thank you, Lish, and good morning, everyone. I too would just like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians and pay my respects to the elders past and present. Banksy, you've stolen the show. I have a box of chocolates, Wayne, on my desk, and I hope people come in to grab one of those. I need a dog. Sally, Adam, we'll get on that. It is incredible that the barriers that you can break down and the magic that can happen if you do break down barriers and you make yourself accessible. At Lifeline, we have been intently focused on the health and wellness of individuals from an emotional standpoint for decades. And it's been an absolute privilege to be the CEO of some 900 odd volunteers who work across the Book Fair Warehouse, the Crisis Support Line and Book Lovers Lane, our bookstore. And I believe there's a couple of volunteers here today, so shout out to you as well. It's no small feat. But the organisation is there primarily for every single one of us on any given day. Doesn't matter what age we are or what crisis we're experiencing, you can always call Lifeline. And they're an organisation that believe absolutely about looking after the individuals on the phones, those taking the calls, and then, of course, being there to support individuals who are the ones that need to do the work, actually, to work through their crisis, enable their coping and decide next steps. So we facilitate that conversation and that movement. And we know that millions of Australians utilise the service to get through the day or the year. So it's a very meaningful organisation. We couldn't imagine a world without it, and that passion is what keeps us coming back. In relation to workplace health and safety, I think it's incredible that we're having this conversation now. I know 10 years ago, mental health in the workplace was not something you could readily discuss. There's a lot of fear and a lot of stigma, and it made it quite difficult. So we have come a long way, and we're still looking, in terms of how to address the issues that individuals are facing. Our most important assets in an organisation are the people, and how to address that. So we're still sort of bogged down a little bit in the science of it all, and it is actually a bit of art and science. So I agree with everything that's been said today and on the slides, very informative, and those are elements and areas that we do need to look at in relation specifically to first responders, but also other agencies. What we look at Lifeline are the themes that emerge. They inform our practices, our evidence-based programs, and how we approach crisis prevention and bereavement or postvention. And one of the themes I think, again, we'll keep coming back to, because of the legislation that's coming into place and because of the changes in the landscape and the obligations of organisations, because of the changes that are happening there, it's becoming very difficult, and we do need to clarify as a community, either legally, politically, socially, we need to clarify where the responsibility for someone's happiness and health ends and the organisation's begins, or where a leader's responsibility for the health and wellness of their staff ends and the responsibility for the individual's health and well-being starts. And that's a very interesting and confronting conversation that needs to happen, because there's resources on both ends. But quite often, leaders can go a little bit too far into the fray, and often individuals can also expect too much of the workplace. So that's a conversation that I think is a theme that we're seeing emerge in a very difficult, wicked problem that we need to solve before we can start implementing the legislation more effectively. We look at some of the things that can affect the mental health and well-being of our first responders. And again, to bring those up into themes, because again, they're all very, very important elements. There are elements that we don't see. And I think when we hire people, we hire for capability and we hire for commitment. And individuals are capable of doing their roles and they're committed to doing their roles. But the other elements, compatibility and capacity, those are not static, nor our capabilities. We train on the role, we develop skills. Our compatibility with either the values of our leadership, with the values of the team that we're in, with the hours, those are all things that remain changing on a day-to-day basis for individuals and organisations. So to try and harness that and emerge a theme that we can then control is quite a challenge, because everyone's different. People leave the workforce potentially to have children, their capacity changes. Their hours need to change. Their inability to work certain hours emerges. And these are all things that can lead to an individual becoming less committed or less capable in their role. And unfortunately, we only have performance management tools in our toolbox when someone becomes less compatible, or they appear less committed, or they're less capable of doing their jobs. And these are all things that we need to overcome, because humans are the most important element of any business that we go into. And in a first responder space, that is definitely something that we need to look at. So I look forward to bringing those themes to the conversation. always and will always argue that our first responders are superheroes, but they're not superhumans. And at Lifeline, we know that the number one reason that people call are relationship breakdowns. The number two reason, substance misuse, domestic violence, isolation and grief. And our first responders are not immune from these life elements happening either. And they often have to bring that to the role as well. How we support them with that is, again, a very big challenge. So I look forward to being a part of the panel, and I hope there's lots of big questions for us. Thank you very, very much again for having me.
Thank you, Carrie. And we will have time for questions after all of these. So I think the questions, the Q&A, have we got the Q&A open at the moment, Alice? It is. So there's a QR code. Just scan that. And if you'd like to answer the question on Slido, just give it a scan, a few quick questions. And if you'd like to add a question to the panel, just put it in there now or ask it live when we get there. Carrie, as you were saying, it's the human relationship factor that is often at the top of the tree, whether it's the calls to Lifeline, relationship breakdowns, or just the factors involved in work, whether it's human error or the way we treat our colleagues. Our next speaker, Dr. Peta Miller, is a work health and safety consultant. She's been working in this industry for 40 years, and I've learnt so many terms. I didn't know the term psychosocial injury when I started this year. I'd never heard of it. Anyone else heard of you are WorkSafe professionals. Has anyone never heard of the psychosocial injury before? Great. I feel stupid. But it was fascinating to me. You hear of mental illness, mental health effects. Psychosocial injury was something totally new to me, as is a human factors professional. Human factors, it's humans interacting with stuff, human error, human interactions, how we can minimise that. So Dr. Miller has been working in this field for so long. She's looked across policy, across strategy, research, evidence. Please give her a big warm welcome.
So, good morning, and good morning, Minister. Yeah, I'm short too. And thank you to our previous speakers. I'd like to pay my respects to Elders past, present and emerging. And I always like to put this picture up because my daughter works for the Europe Foundation in Victoria, which is looking at Victorian rights for Aboriginals down there. And it just shows the diversity of nations in our country. This is going to be a bit awkward, so I'm going to turn like this. It's unacceptable in your organisation or the ACT community that anybody accepts that doing your work, either as paid or as volunteers, is acceptable. Your obligations to help the ACT community never, ever overrides your employers and your own duty to protect your health and safety. Oh, it's down there. I can see it. Thanks. So let's just acknowledge the reality that your work, whether you're in the field or doing the very important job of people back in the office, let's not forget them because they're also incredibly important, is complex, it's physically and psychologically demanding. That is the reality. And all risks that you face every day, every situation is unique. But Jacqui and I were talking about this before we began, but there's also completely foreseeable, predictable risks. So whilst the nuances of every situation is different, they're actually consistent, and you can actually anticipate them by consulting with your workers and begin. So my theme is around design out the ones that you can and manage them. So I just wanted to talk very quickly about some of the interacting physical and psychosocial hazards. Your point is absolutely correct that the psychosocial factors underpin the people's psychological health and safety at work, they also underpin their physical safety at work. And we know, in fact, the strongest predictors of musculoskeletal injuries, in fact, the psychosocial ones. I'm an ergonomist in primary training and an occupational therapist. It isn't that your manual handling is important, but it's actually the time pressure, where so you don't follow the procedures. So let's actually think about some of the key issues, factors that are present in emergency first responders. So clearly we know being exposed to traumatic events and unfortunately the aggression and violence that is part of your work, some of which you cannot control. The shift work. And it's interesting, Jacqui, you mentioned shift work, and the WHO and ILO put out a report recently that showed working over 50 hours a week is actually the strongest predictor of all long latency diseases. So you can look through those and see, yep, tick, tick. How many of you see those every day in your work? We also need to actually think about things like job control, how much control you have of what, when and how you're doing, the adequacy of the tools and equipment. And I'm going to, in a moment, just do a root cause analysis to show how all of these interact together. And the emotional and practical support, and Banksy is part of that. Your leadership styles, that's not just at the head office, but also within the team and between people who have power within the group. We know that a very strong predictor is organisational justice and procedures when things go wrong, and having appropriate reward and recognition. Again, I'm going to touch on some of those. So the next group, so organisational work and task design and management are incredibly important, and they in fact influence culture and social relationships at work. And I've put a list of those that are most important. And there's some very interesting work around moral injury that's coming out in first responders, and that's when people actually they want to help and they don't have the resources to do it. So imagine yourself, you're called out, which patient do you choose, which house do you choose to respond to, but also when you see unacceptable behaviours by colleagues. And then there's a whole range of partially modifiable features that I urge you and our Ms. Leeson actually drew our attention to the responsibility of people to take for their own personal circumstances. But one of the challenges I'd say is that work can actually cause us to tip over the edge. So there's employers don't have to take responsibility for non-work related things, but they can actually do amazing jobs to actually help people's support mental health at home, and unfortunately community attitudes. But that, Minister, is where things like awareness campaigns saying violence is not acceptable to do to our first responders, and remind them that these people, they can walk away, and unfortunately too many of them do if they're burnt out. We need them, and they never ever deserve to be treated the way they are. So let's actually think about some of the cognitive emotional changes that happen under stress and fatigue. And those of you who are managers in the room, I always like to put this up because it shows the tight nexus between designing healthy and safe work and organisational efficiency. And you want both. I know you want both. So let's actually think about it. When actually people are stressed and fatigued, there's significant impairments to their capacity to make good quality mental decisions, and their physical reaction time's slow. We all know that when we're fatigued. We attention tunnel, we miss things, we will shed some tasks, not do things that we think that we can get away with now, which may or may not be important. We all know what happens to our memory and our concentration, and that we take unconscious shortcuts. Some of those may be good if our training's excellent, or they may not be. And there's a real deference to power, and Commission, that's when that team culture and the stuff that you're talking about becomes really important, because if the most powerful person in the group is behaving with poor quality care standards or in poor ways with incivility, people may go along with that and have moral injuries. And we know that all of that capitulates into increased errors at work. So there are emotional and behavioural reactions, again going back to the Commissioner's point about incivility. We know that we will all, under stress and fatigue, have increased emotional reactivity. We will all flare more and perhaps behave in ways we don't want to and we should have done better. And importantly, from a safety point of view, we might take safety shortcuts. They may be the right ones because humans are adaptive and can make dynamic decisions, but they may be the wrong ones. And on the left, so on the left we'll have all these increased, and on the right. One of the important things that I like to note is that when stress and fatigue goes up, performance goes down. We know that, and poor performance is right. She's telling me my time up, so I'm going to show you a root cause analysis of a AMBO and the importance of actually looking back at the underlying causes, the interacting underlying causes behind an incident. So whether it's an assault or an issue of burnout, there are a whole range of things that are interacting together, and each one of these are opportunities to design out and actually improve the likelihood of those incidents occurring. I'm going to leave that up for a little bit because I know Alice is going to pull me off the stage if I speak too much longer. So shall I start? No, you can. I can leave?
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I'm going to leave that up because we're going to have a quick break, a very quick break, because there's always lots of questions and we want to make the most of our expert panel. So jump up, grab yourself another cup of tea. Now, if there is a breakfast beside you, they've all been eaten, have they? There's one over there. We'll do a roulette. Please continue eating. Go and get yourself a cup of tea, coffee, refresh, and we'll take 5 minutes and I'll call you right back. Just a reminder, if you could scan the QR code, there's places to ask questions, but we also would love you to answer our poll. So just scan it, a quick answer of the questions so we get a sense of where you're at there. Were you aware of the industry breakfast? It's a bit of a survey for us before this one. Where did you hear about them? Are you currently, or have you been a first responder? Do you know a first responder that suffered from a workplace psychosocial injury? And do you know a first responder that has suffered from a workplace physical injury? So we would really appreciate you scanning the QR code and answering those questions. We'll kick off this panel discussion. So many of you, as you were listening to our speakers, may have had lots of questions to ask and are thinking about how you might frame that question. But this is an open forum. We've got until about 8:40. All questions open. I'll start with, I think, Commissioner Phillips. Oh, actually, we might start with the questions on the floor. I don't want to start the questions. I'm going to kick off the questions because there've been some already kicked off here on the Slido. Are there guidelines or requirements for psychosocial support and post-trauma care following high-stress events? And if that's not your question, you can hand it over to someone else.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So we do have guidelines and requirements for psychological support in post-trauma following life. So we have a variety of processes and tools within the ESA, including our peer support network. So first stop is peer support network. We have an extensive peer support network, which is exactly what it says. It's firefighters, paramedics and volunteers who have been trained to offer that first level of peer support and mental health. That it also involves what we call a debrief after an event. So we may think about what we did well, what didn't go so well, more on a process issue. We have other avenues for support as well. We have employee assistance programs. We have psychological support within the ESA as well. So following an event, a very high trauma event, we will we switch into a gear and ensure that we get help out to those people when we can, as soon as possible. But regards to offering people help, there's a little bit of balancing act between forcing help on people and waiting for people needing help and having the doors open for them to come for help. So I think it's really important I'm technically a first responder, I suppose, but as a former firefighter on a truck at particularly high stressful events following that, sometimes the last thing you need to do is depending on yourself, is have someone come at you. It's rather having the tools, the avenues, the phone numbers available for you to do that yourself as well. I hope that answers the question.
Anything from a policy point of view, or anyone else want to add anything? No? Do you think the data presented earlier underrepresents the issues for first responders?
Absolutely. And
how much worse is it?
I'm not going to quantify that because, in fact, that's the problem with the data. But we know that people need to feel psychologically safe, both to report a near miss and an actual injury. And too many people will actually have a look at the system, say it's just not worth it, and leave.
How can we change that? Because obviously it's a huge issue, and if we're losing people, we need people, certainly in the first responder space, I think across the board. How do you change that?
Firstly, we change it by ensuring that we have a reporting system in place and that we actively encourage people to report. Some of the issues around the data not being as accurate as we want it to be can be the stigma associated with reporting a psychosocial hazard or a psychological risk. The other common one that we hear at WorkSafe is, well, we've reported things before and nothing's been done. So not only do we need to ensure that we have an appropriate reporting system in place, but we need to ensure that when somebody reports, that we address the issue immediately. So waiting 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it is, isn't good enough. It's got to be addressing it immediately.
And I'm just going to say that, is that for me, it's a red flag. Yeah. If you're near-miss indication, so I don't want to see incidents occurring, I want to see the near-miss data.
Yep, agree.
No, you're right. I can share this one too if you want. Yeah, great. Preparing people for and keeping people at work, I just use an analogy. Emergency management, we use an acronym called PPRR, Preparation, Preparedness, Response and Recovery. So basically during the winter we prepare as an agency for the oncoming season. We let you know what's happening, we get you prepared. So we get people, we're ready for an emergency, and then in the event of emergency we respond, and then following an emergency we recover. So big storm last year, we get in recovery. What we do in emergency service of our people, we don't do any of the PP. We just do the R and the 2 Rs. So we respond and then we try and get them to recover. It's too late. So what we've got to focus on is preparation and preparedness. We need to bring people into an organisation with proper induction, training, eyes wide open, tools available, mental health fitness and mental health awareness, the training for our leaders, a pipeline of leaders who are humanistic rather than technical, compassionate rather than process-driven. Those things are important too, but it's a whole life cycle that we need to start preparing. Here's my pitch, Minister, for my business cases next year with regards to ensuring that we bring those things into the emergency services so that people are better prepared so the next generation serve our ACT community better.
But you also need enough staff on, in order to, and he didn't set me up, to actually allow people to rest and recover.
Oh, that's part of the business case too.
Yeah.
Can I mention another R, Wayne? It's risk management. Really important one, and it does all of the things that you've referred to.
On reporting, I'm just going to bring up a small thing at the ABC because we had an issue last year. 25% of people had reported being bullied at the ABC, 12% sexually harassed. And so they put up QR codes throughout the building for anonymous reporting or actual reporting. The funny thing is that it's not anonymous. You have to report from your Microsoft login, and I think that has stopped a lot of people reporting. When you say systems and structures in place for reporting, how do they do it so they feel secure in their role that then follows through? Because I think that then goes into the next question: how can we encourage people in industry to speak up and reach out to WorkSafe if they feel that things are at risk?
Yeah, great question, because there's a couple of things in there. Firstly, I want to make really clear that bullying and harassment in the workplace doesn't mean necessarily that the PCBU has breached the Work Health and Safety Act. They're two different things. In relation to reporting and them being anonymous, there are a number of surveys that you can use that are anonymous surveys, and one of those is People at Work, and I'd encourage you to get onto our website. It's a free tool for employers in Australia, and it's a psychosocial diagnostic tool. So it will tell you things like you've got 24% of people in your workplace who have been exposed to bullying in the last 6 months. Then it's up to the PCBU to take action about the fact that bullying exists in the workplace. If you don't do anything about it and you know about it, that could very well be a breach of the Work Health and Safety Act. Two things there. Bullying in the workplace doesn't necessarily mean you've breached the Act, and you need to actively, as an employer, go out and give people that opportunity to anonymously report. In relation to coming forward and speaking to WorkSafe, we're doing a number of things at WorkSafe to encourage engagement. But what's really important for me is to explain what the role of WorkSafe is. The role of WorkSafe is to go in and ensure that the PCBU has support systems in place to ensure that they're managing the risk of psychosocial hazards in the workplace. WorkSafe do not go in and advocate for the individual worker. Our role, if we're going to prosecute, is always against the PCBU, and it's WorkSafe against the PCBU for breaching the legislation. If you are going to raise something with WorkSafe, it's important that you try the systems in the workplace first. So if you report it to your employer, for instance, and nothing happens, then we know the system isn't working. And we can then come in and look at that system. But if you report it to your employer and they are actively engaging to do something about that risk or hazard in the workplace, then it's likely that WorkSafe won't have a role there.
Carrie, you mentioned around mental health awareness. Over the last 10 years, there's been a huge boost in mental health awareness within workplaces. Do you think that has resulted in more people coming forward to ask for help?
I think it's kicked off a very important conversation. I think it's been touched on stigma, self-stigma, which is often not communicated, are barriers to care and barriers to help-seeking behaviours. Culture is another one. It's all the soft, we call them soft things, but there are systems and processes in place, but unless an individual feels safe in coming forward, as long as they're, again, not judging themselves and there isn't a culture of judgment in the workplace, it makes it very difficult for individuals to access it doesn't matter how wonderful the service is, it makes it difficult for them to ask for that support when they need it. I don't know, I come from a physical health background a couple of decades ago, and I know going into a lot of government agencies, we were not allowed to raise mental health as part of our assessments. We could check for diabetes, heart disease, flexibility, sleep. We could see how much brown rice you were having, if it was enough fibre in your diet. We'd check cholesterol and liver function. We were not allowed to talk about mental health. So in the last 10 years, it's a relatively quick period of time to be trying to wrap our heads around what is probably the most important element in terms of our quality of life. Work is what we do, half our waking life. What you do and how you feel about what you do is incredibly important as well. So alignment with the values of the organisation you're working for is important. But the training has also come a long way. I know when we were having think tanks and roundtables 10 years ago for first responders, we were trying to find programs in Australia that addressed the specific risks that first responders were finding themselves in. And it was very difficult to find programs that were working well for Australians in Australia. So we looked further abroad, and we landed up in Canada with the Mental Health Commission in Canada. And we brought for the first time to Australia the first evidence-based program that essentially resulted in the increase of resilience in individuals to be able to tackle. And so we brought those in, and we were finding that the impact on individuals' resilience and their ability to cope with workplace stresses was wrapped up in leadership communication around debriefing. Commissioner Colvin, back in the day, they had a number of incidences on site in the AFP buildings around the country, and he brought us in to say, what am I doing? I've got all the processes, and what else can I possibly do? He was incredibly dedicated, as you are, Wayne, to the wellness and the happiness of and the joy and inner peace of his workforce. And what was essentially missing was they had processes and procedures in place, but they were driving outcomes. So in the event of a stressful situation or a traumatic incident, they were doing formal, full debriefs on individuals. And he was finding that was harming people more. So sometimes we go in with the process with the best intentions, but have we had the time to explore the unintended consequences of shoving that process into the workplace to create change or to be seen to be creating change? We need to understand the unintended consequences for people. Now what we do is ad hoc debriefs. So at the end of a tough situation or a tough event, you're pulling your team to the back of the truck. You're saying, that was a really shit situation. That was tough. Some of you are going to be fine right now. Some of you are not fine right now. Any reaction is a healthy reaction, and I want you to know that. It needs to come from leadership. Some of you are going to be fine and sleep well tonight. Some of you won't. Some of you won't be fine in 3 days' time. Know that there are resources to you. These are the resources. Don't forget, as a leader, I am one of those resources. I will check in with you in a few days' time. So it's the culture, and it absolutely comes from the top down. But as individuals, you need to value yourself enough to do the work. I always say, I can go to the gym all day. You're not going to get the muscles. Individuals and leaders need to work together to use the resources, to communicate and shape the resources of organisations so that you can live your best life at work. You can feel safe, and everyone gets the best out of you as well, including your family.
Thank you, Carrie.
I
Dr.
just
Miller?
wanted to
What
respond
Carrie
to that.
said.
So that's absolutely right, but I just want to pull you up on a couple of things. I think we talk too much about individual resilience. Everybody breaks. If the work design and the management and the situations like exposure to traumatic events is too high, what we need to also step back to all of that, but also say to our workers, tell me what would have made that better. And what often they will say is, look, could you just have the equipment on site that worked in the right way? Could I have got a bit more information before I got the call out so I knew what I was anticipating? So let's also put the focus squarely on the things that actually you can do as a manager and a designer of work back in the office to actually take away the stressors that you can, not just tell people that they need to become more resilient. So make sure there was enough staff on site, that they had the training and qualifications that they need, that the equipment worked, that there was good interagency coordination so that there wasn't squabbles around roles and responsibilities. I know, you can think of a whole range of things that were in place.
Thank you. Anyone want? No, that's all good. We might kick along with the questions, and as you can see, questions change priority. So if you like this question and want it to float to the top, please just mark it in the Slido. How can we support first responders and veterans who have suffered psychological injuries but are seeking to stay engaged in the workforce? Who'd like to answer?
I'm happy to start, and maybe Wayne wants to take over. Firstly, we need to make sure that the jobs that they go to do not put them in further traumatic incidents. We need to find jobs that are very different, jobs that are low stress, jobs that do not require them to be in those high stress situations. And that comes down to retraining, and we have an obligation to retrain under the injury management system.
Before I just hand over, and also limit exposure. Sometimes you will have people come to you and say, I'm beginning to get triggered. If your door is open, they'll come and say, I'm beginning to not cope. Listen and respect that. And it may be that you can do some task rotation so that they have some more recovery time from those exposures.
Look, only thing I've got to add is retraining is really important. So I would say when I became a firefighter a long time ago, I came off the trucks to get promoted, and it was a brand new world for me to enter administration area within that, and it's quite a foreign environment for a lot of firefighters and paramedics particularly to come in. So our young women paramedics who are pregnant come in to do alternate duties. It's a very different environment, so the retraining is very important, finding the skill set, what we can do to add to their skills, to actually benefit them in a longer term career, maybe within the agency but not in a first responder role, or outside the agency, so they have a career trajectory that's beneficial for them and also for the emergency services. But I don't have a specific answer for that because it's a really difficult position and it's very individualistic for each person when they suffer an injury and come in for alternative duties.
Thank you. That was the question at the top, wasn't it? No, that's another one. Are there regulations in place to limit exposure to those traumatic situations and provide mandated recovery periods?
Regulations in place in terms of managing the risks to psychological and physical health, and they've recently been strengthened. The question went away.
We'll put the question back on the screen, is that all right?
So I can make sure I answer it. In terms of specific exposure to traumatic events, no. What it says is that the employers must do everything so far as reasonably practical to identify those risks and, as Jacqui said, put systems in place to design and manage them. So there aren't mandated recovery periods. That means, but if somebody is harmed, then usually there'll be a return to work program. But then that goes back to the conversations with their employer around the design of work and safe returns to work in terms of limiting subsequent exposure and perhaps putting them on alternate duties.
If we have a crew today, either paramedics or firefighters who are exposed to a very traumatic event, we have processes within to take those crews away. We may rest a fire station crew and do some jiggling of resources around to protect them, to put some processes in place straight away. But we have those both in paramedics side and the firefighting side.
As you know, employment gets tighter and you might be tight-staffed. How do you deal with that then? It's not like the libraries and you can just close the doors for the day and say, we haven't got enough staff to cover when you have got those tight requirements.
Yeah, look, one of the things is to move people around. We're really reluctant to do that often as employers, but when we know somebody is at risk and they have reported hazards, then we should be looking at where is the best fit for them in our organisation so they can have that downtime. One of the things about psychosocial hazards is that they may result in a psychological injury over time. So it's the compound effect of the exposure that will create, in most instances, the psychological injury. So how do we avoid that? We avoid it by not exposing the same person over and over again. And we see it often in workplaces where employers will say, well, you know, Jacqui can handle stuff, we'll stick her in. Or Lish is really good at this, so Lish can do this, and Lish can do it again, and Lish can do it again and again and again and again and again, again, until Lish ends up with a psychological injury. So we need to ensure that we're not using the same people over and over again and exposing them over and over again.
This is a great next question, and I think, Carrie, it highlights what you were saying, and I think a few conversations I've had. What steps do you undertake to ensure you prioritise self-care? Because we're not just talking about work. People bring their relationships to work and everything that's going on in life to work.
Yeah. Look, I think just to touch on that point, as you mentioned, Lish, it's psychosocial safety is something you hadn't heard of in recent history. So you have to assume we've got an expert panel, they're talking and using terms that people don't necessarily in a workplace understand. We need to bring languages into, and it's not condescension, it's just bringing languages in so people can identify how they're feeling and communicate it. We use the mental health continuum in a lot of our training, and that's 4 colours. So organisations that come through our training, including the AFP, who make graduates mandatory training for graduates come through, they can say I'm feeling green, yellow, orange or red, and that tells the leadership and the organisation and everyone around them exactly what needs to happen. They don't have to find, like with a physical injury, I've broken my arm, they don't need to explain exactly what they're going through. We're talking about thoughts and feelings and human beings, and we're also unique. That's the challenge, is we're still talking about concepts and evidence, but we need to bring culture and language, make it very easy for people to communicate where they're at. In terms of self-care, this is an interesting one because we talk about it a lot, and again, probably like psychosocial safety, we say exercise self-care, exercise self-care. It was during COVID, we would meet at my dining room table every morning, my executive, we would divide team A, team B, and then we would deploy into the office because we're obviously essential services and on site. And every day I was talking to the team when I was in about self-care, exercise self-care, and one of our crisis support centre supervisors, and I thought I was doing the right thing, said, well, what the hell is self-care for you? Because I can't do anything that I would deem self-care. And I realised there and then that we needed to break even that concept down for individuals. It's as unique as the individual themselves. And then we discovered through COVID that people weren't able to exercise self-care, but so many people weren't because they didn't value themselves enough. They didn't have self-compassion to say, I am valuable and I deserve to be cared for by myself and by my organisation or others. So we start with self-compassion now. We go forward or back a step, and we say, and we do training, and we do courses, and we do awareness around self-talk. We do, cognitive behavioural therapies. We use evidence bases, but to build that sense of value in individuals to then go on and determine what self-care looks like for them, whether it's walking, exercise, etc.
I'll go through the list though, because I think we want real examples. What do you do? What do each of you do for self-care, just briefly?
Yeah.
I think it's a personal question, is it? Is that from the person that asked?
Yeah, well, for me it's varied and open. I love to walk. I have 2 golden retrievers. I'm very envious of Banksy, who's so calm, and they bring me a lot of joy. I've got my family and I love to travel. So, short, medium and long-term ways to care for myself.
I've got a dog I walk. I go to the gym. Actually, it's a self-care. I don't really think about it myself. I probably sound a bit naive here. But my self-care is probably talking a lot. I talk a lot anyway, and I probably a big debriefer. I like to, I'm going to say vomit out my stuff out verbally to my poor wife and to anyone else who cares to listen, who I trust. That's probably what I do. Empty the head.
Yeah. Exercise and sleep.
I'm just going to take a different approach to the question. I really want to make it clear that the Work Health and Safety Act puts the obligation on the PCBU to ensure that you are safe and healthy in your workplace. So the obligation is not on the individual to ensure that they are looking after themselves. And I want to make that clear before I answer the question. As far as self-care goes, it's a little bit like do as I say and not as I do.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because it is personal, not private, and I think it's something probably we all struggle with. I went for a swim before coming here this morning, just 5 laps, stayed in my lane. Laneless. But the next question, emergency services are available 24 hours a day. Fatigue management is a serious issue. What recommendations are there on shift pattern design? I feel like this is a big question, one that needs to be addressed clearly, because shift, sleeplessness, fatigue, stress all relates back, and not just and physical health issues arising.
Yes, so let me start with saying that shift pattern is an agreement, an enterprise agreement between the employer and the employees. So we have some agreed shift patterns here in the ACT. But, a recent shift pattern change has been the ACT ambulance service. So 1983, they commenced a traditional 10, 14-hour, 2 10, 2 14-hour night shifts. 2 10-hour day shifts, 2 14-hour night shifts. And last year, they were very passionate around the fact that the 2 14-hour night shifts were unsustainable. I totally agree with that. I've worked shift patterns myself, particularly for ambulances who are responding a lot. 14 hours are staying awake, 10-hour rest during the daytime, 14 hours is not optimal. It's not optimal for them, at least not optimal for us as the community who need their expertise, and we really don't want them to make mistakes, right? So they've initiated a collaborative approach to a new design of their roster system that started on the 11th of April this year, and we've seen some success out of that. So the ambulance roster system before that was very much a piece of bread and butter consistently across the same amount of resources across the day. Now it's demand driven. It's more when they're busiest is when we've got the most ambulances, and when we're least busy we have less ambulances. Which has resulted in a 1 10-hour night shift over a 5-day period. So that's been a big win for them, and that was something that the paramedics and the trade workers, the Transport Workers Union that we work with have come together, and we've got a new shift design. Recently, enterprise agreement with Fire and Rescue, we saw some debate around some new shifts. Fire and Rescue New South Wales has 24-hour shifts across the border. I'm dead set against anyone working 24 hours on a shift. So we've put some, with consultation and agreement with the UFU, have put some stipulations about the length of time firefighters can work in normal course of work. And if we can talk about normal course of work now, but come the bushfires, we have some processes in place where people may need to work longer hours. But that's the two basic shift patterns we've got at the moment. And I think it's important that we recognise that people need not just a break between shifts, but a substantial number of days between rotating shifts to really rest and recover and get a normal circadian rhythm back into their lives.
Dr. Miller?
I was absolutely right. What's really harmful is not actually getting a decent sleep, and one of the big challenges for not only first responders doing roster work, but anybody doing roster work, is sleep deprivation, and it takes time to actually readjust your circadian rhythm. One of the big challenges is also where shifts that actually shorten the sleep periods, because it takes time for people to do their normal household things, get home, to travel, to do their kids, to do their housework. So it's an industrial issue, but it's also very much a work design issue. And it's an interesting balance between the science and the industrial relations, that one.
Thank you. I'll push on with the questions if you want to keep adding and answer the survey questions as well. Are there any measures in place to evaluate whether first responders are adequately prepared for high-risk situations before they occur? I don't know if that's...
No, there are no measures in place. I can't measure that. I can say we trained them, we induct, train, retrain, keep training, top-up training, all of those things we have in place for first responders, but can I measure that? I don't feel I have any particular data to say that they are ready for that thing on that day. All I can say is hand on heart that we've done the training and the preparation that we can provide, but I don't feel like there's a measure, if that's...
What about for new, when you get new recruits in, for those who've been in the industry for a long time?
I might be underselling myself. So, of course, they have training where they need to pass exams and competencies, etc. They're probably the measures, if that's the measures, I suppose. But I was thinking more about data measures through their career. Do we have those? I can tell you the amount of times that firefighters train here in the ACT, go back to the ESAT in regards to doing basic skills training, the amount of qualifications they've got, how they keep those qualifications up in regards to aerial or hazardous materials or confined space and rescue. I can tell you that our ACTAs, who are probably the most highly trained ambulance officers and paramedics in Australia, who recertify, they're all under ANSPA, the National Health Regulation, it's just escaped my mind, with their professional development. So I do have those measures in place. Maybe I was reading it too literally. That's me.
I was just going to take a different interpretation of measures. Great point about the data, but actually say what can you do. And just closer to the incident, I'd be asking workers before they go out to hire, so that's very important triaging before they hit the vehicles and start to roll out, what do you know about it? And then when you finish, you've called back and you're back in the station, what worked, what went wrong, so we can have a continuous learning loop, and that also can be a data measure as well. Did we pick up? Have we learnt from that situation? Have we put improvements in place?
Might move to the last question. Are there any different types of support required? Carrie, you talk about Lifeline across the board, helping people, but for different types of first responders. I'm thinking here not just employed, but the huge volunteer force we draw on and how they fit that into their life and their paid work. Is there any different support offered?
Well, we look at, obviously, everyone being human to start with. It's impossible, as Wayne was saying, to know. You can provide all of the training, but if someone has had an argument with the spouse or lost a pet the night before, their backpack's pretty full personally before they get to the door. They can't leave it at the door and then go into work. So that pre-chat, I think, is so important. In terms of specific industries, yes, there is specific training. We find that it's not so much because we're all human to our core, but it's really about providing training in a way that resonates with the specific role and a specific industry, because some industries, firefighters, for example, can't necessarily relate to the legal industry. Is burnout, are those injuries that can take place similar or as impactful? Absolutely. But how you communicate, how they can occur, and in the training, we do have specific courses for first responders. We have specific courses for the legal profession and specific industries. So it's important that the content remain the same. We're all very similar as human beings. We haven't evolved enough to have those requirements change. But we used to train with a first responder and a mental health expert because you needed to have that mental health expert as well as the first responder. The first responder connected, they had that respect and that rapport, that's cultural. The mental health expert would bring the policy, the procedure and the evidence base, and that's how you would cut through with the message and create change.
I guess like the debrief in the truck after an event, is there something, because the experience shared is so unique to each particular first responder situation. Is there something offered in particular at ESA for each of the very different experiences?
Definitely. So I just want to echo what Carrie said. So, at the core, we're all the same, but the nuances between the different emergency services is very important to recognise. Regards to those debriefing and those mental health tools, sometimes you want to see someone who dresses like you rather than someone from another area. Also wanted to just pick up on what Carrie said about us as people and bringing baggage to work, which is fine, but I think we think about people being full of compartments, but we're not. We are our whole selves all the time with all the problems from the traffic, our kids, partnership problems, financial problems, and then we have the problems that we have with the interactions we have when we walk into the workplace, and then we have the added problems that we have faced when we go to an incident. So we've got to ensure that my responsibility is as commissioners, the minute they come on duty, that they come into a safe place and that people can then concentrate on what they need to do to protect the community. But I think we've got to be careful not to compartmentalise people with their mental fitness.
Can I add to that,
Yep.
Lish? I know we're out of time, but just very quickly, the support and the hazards may be different. but there's a tried and tested system that we should all know, and it's called the risk management system. And the way that we risk manage the events is exactly the same. So one of the posters that we have at WorkSafe is called Different Hazard, Same Process, and it's the risk management process, which is identify, assess, control and review. And if you work all of your systems around those 4 things, then you should be doing psychosocial hazards well in your workplace.
Just to wrap it up, can I have a comment from each of you? We're all going off to work, leading our people in this, wanting to make it as safe as possible. What's your final words?
So I just want to resonate what Jacqueline said, is that designing and managing work well shouldn't just be should actually be assisting all of your workers. If one of your workers speaks up about something, it's highly likely others are feeling the same. And don't ask them just to be personally resilient, make the organisation resilient so everybody's healthy and safe.
I think it's a complex space because it's in a way we're building the plane while we're flying it. We can't stop, switch off for 5 years and come back perfect. So acknowledging everyone's doing exactly and as much as they can. We can always do better, acknowledging that. I just think I want to acknowledge we're going into what is the busiest period for our first responder agencies and for Lifeline as well. It is the festive season. There's a lot of joy and cheer around, but it also breeds a lot of a reflection, a time of reflection, but also isolation and stress for individuals. So please take care of yourselves. Take care. Think today of a few things you can do to de-escalate or manage your own stress. And please take care and have a safe and enjoyable festive season.
Spread the word for people to look after my first responders this festive season. Thank you, Carrie. We're all going to work now, so do us a favour, go in there, acknowledge people, smile, make them feel welcome. Those small interactions, particularly people who have some authority at work, has a downstream cascading effect that will reap you benefits in regards to their engagement and how they feel. So one day, just let's go in there today and bring some joy and happiness when you walk into a building.
And for me, it's that I dream of the days when we begin to risk manage psychosocial hazards in workplaces in the same way that we risk manage physical hazards.
Thank you all for your wonderful experience and being able to share that. Can we give a big round of applause to my fabulous guests? Jacqui Agius, Commissioner Wayne Phillips, Carrie Leeson and Dr. Peta Miller. And thank you all for coming out. These have really been extraordinary events, and I know work safety is probably not a conversation that's had often and loudly, and I certainly want to pitch a story to the ABC, but trying to make work safety, it's so relevant, so important that we all know about this, and psychosocial safety is not something that's a buzzword just in the industry, but everybody, every single worker knows that there are risks and there's support and there's ways to manage it. I will pitch a story. I'd hope something gets up. If anyone has a suggestion of how to tell this story in a way that I hate to say gets people click on it, whether it's personal experience or some other way of telling it, I'd love to hear from you. But thank you all for coming out. Thanks to WorkSafe ACT for putting on these fabulous breakfasts, and the team here at the Realm for delivering the goods, and to you for coming out. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.